Welcome to Gotta Ask. This is a presentation of UmpLife, the premier provider of customized umpire accessories and unique game use amenities. Tonight's program is entitled Outnumbered and Breaking Barriers, where our guests will be baseball umpires Perry Barber, Lisa Turbitt, and Kelly Elliott Dine. Please type your questions in the chat box below and we'll get them to them as soon as we can. This video will be posted to the UmpLife page after tonight's show for viewing. Keep in mind this feed is about 30 to 40 seconds behind what you're actually seeing. And now your host of Gotta Ask, Ray Brownlee.
Thanks, Tommy. Good evening, ladies. Thanks for joining me tonight. I think this is a really important show. We're all umpires, but we've all had to break barriers. But for a guy, I ran into some obstacles along the way, and I want to share your stories because the levels you have reached and what you've done in your careers is nothing but inspiring. As when I contacted you, I actually said to you in my email that I want 3 of my heroes to join me on the show to tell your story. So welcome to the show, and we're going to dive right in. So Perry, I'm going to start with you. How you doing, Perry?
Well, you wanted 3 of your heroes and you got Mo, Larry, and Curly. So, we'll just do the best we can.
So I was reading your bio and there's nothing about comedy on it. So Perry,
in a former life.
So Perry, as much as you've done as umpiring, I have to say that your backstory before this other career, you were a Jeopardy champion. I mean, that's like, okay, now not only are you breaking barriers kind of an umpire, you're also smart. So you're on Jeopardy and you're a champion. And then I keep reading and I see.
But I'm also completely ambitionless, because the reason I went on Jeopardy was to finance my profligate lifestyle, which is consisting mainly of doing everything I possibly can to avoid getting a real job, which is why I was a traveling musician for about 10, 15 years, and why I became an umpire afterwards.
So I was reading about your musical career, and singer-songwriter, guitarist. You wrote songs that were recorded by Bette Midler, Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show. You actually were the opening act for Hall & Oates, Bruce Springsteen, and Billy Joel. Like, wow, that's really unbelievable. That's so impressive.
It seems like a dream now, doesn't it? Yeah, it was a long time ago. And thank you for mentioning it. I'm still getting a lot of mileage out of that period of my life. At the time, it was a career, or I guess a sort of a career that I enjoyed, although I didn't really have any overriding ambition to become a huge rock star. I just liked playing music and liked being around musicians and traveling and having fun. And I think umpiring is a natural kind of follow-up to that lifestyle, the itinerant artist, shall we say, because umpiring is definitely an art and a craft. And sorry.
Okay.
And we are artists and craftspeople who engage in it. So I'm just fixing my little iPad here, so
right,
don't worry about me.
While you're doing that, I'm going to talk to Lisa. Lisa.
Okay.
I've known you a long time. You've been one of my mentors. You helped me get into the Baseball Canada program. You're also a school teacher. So tell us about what you do away from umpiring.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on, Ray and Tommy.
Hi, Lisa.
Yes, I'm a school teacher, Ray, here in Halton. And although I live in Burlington, I teach in Milton. And the school that I teach at is named Chris Hadfield, which is named after the first Canadian commander of the International Space Station. Yep. His family currently and still lives in our community. So it's really neat to work at a school where you have a living hero, a real hero, who is living in the neighborhood and has such a connection to the school. When he was training, before he went into space, he did an online satellite link with the kids when he was in the underwater space station, because he obviously trains in NASA in the US. and he did a video with the kids underwater and talked to them.
Cool.
He also was learning Russian, obviously, to go on to the space station. And we had some students who were Russian, and he had a little conversation with them. And then when he was in space, if any of you follow him on the guitar, you know, our school was one of the ones that was featured when he was up in space. So to have somebody who your school's named after is amazing, but to have them also be a connection and a real life inspiration to the kids is amazing, because he talks about how hard it was. And he actually wrote a book called The Darkest Dark, which was about him watching the lunar landing when he was a young boy. And that inspired him to become an astronaut.
Cool. Okay, this is for Kelly. Obviously, you have a distinguished military career. Thanks for your service, Kelly, and tell us about your background and what you're doing now.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Ray and Tommy. I really appreciate it. It's just an honor to be here with both Lisa and Perry. I can't wait to get a chance to work with one or both of them someday. But yes, I was in the military. I was a Navy nurse for 13 years, and I was honorably discharged as a lieutenant commander. I started out at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis and ended up leaving. You guys will have to ask me about that story some other time. But I did transfer into a program where I went into the nursing field and ended up graduating and getting commissioned as an ensign in the U.S. Navy Nurse Corps. So between active duty and reserve duty, I had a total of 13 years. But I still feel like I have some of that line officer background. In fact, I was told my first 3 or 4 years in the Navy Nurse Corps that I needed to stop acting so much like a line officer. And I still to this day don't know what they meant. I really don't.
Perry's got a few problems there. Okay, let's get into what we're here for. How did you get in? I'll start with Lisa. How did you get into umpiring, Lisa?
I got into umpiring quite by accident. I have a younger brother, my younger brother, John. He was playing t-ball and I was at the game and there was no umpire. So they were going to get one of the parents to do it. And my dad was my brother's coach. And so he said, why don't we get my daughter to do it? Because when I started playing baseball, I literally was in love with baseball. Like I played it all the time. I made my mom throw to me, always playing. So when my dad suggested it, I was like, absolutely. So I umpired that game and it was at Greenwood Park in Burlington. And the other coach said to my dad after the game, wow, your daughter did a really good job considering she's never umpired before. And that was it. I'm here now.
We're going to cover where you got to, but that's great. So that, Kelly, same question for you.
Sure. I had actually started as an umpire because I was coaching our 3 sons in baseball. Growing up, it was my mom and dad and my brother and I. We played baseball religiously, football too. And at the time, though, when I was younger, I played baseball with my brother's team. My dad was the coach. I played pitcher and first base and second base. And when we moved in middle school, I ended up in a region where they did not have they didn't have baseball for girls anymore. So I was pretty much told by my parents when we went to go sign up that I wasn't welcome at baseball and had to sign up for softball. I'd never played softball. So everything felt unfamiliar to me when I picked up a softball and held it, you know. And I have distinct memories of like walking back across the field to my car where my mom was waiting for me and seeing my brother and his friends over on the baseball field and just wanting to run over there and join them on the field because that's all I knew. And so God blessed me with 3 sons, and I was their baseball coaches growing up when they were younger, both in Little League and out. And one day we were leaving a practice, my oldest son and I, and we were walking through the park, and I looked over to the next field and there was 2 teams standing there, 2 Little League teams, but they didn't have an umpire. And I just looked at my son and I said, I'll be home later, and went over and picked up a rusty mask and the pillow balloon and got behind the plate, and the bug bit. I mean, I don't think I was any good that day, but I just knew that's exactly what I wanted to do.
Wow. So Perry Barber, same question for you. How did you get into umpiring?
You know, I love it that both Kelly and Lisa started because of their connections to people in their family. And that's how I started umpiring too. It was my mother who encouraged me to call up a little league and apply for a job. I had, I think, overstayed my welcome when I was visiting her at one point, and she just was trying to think up ways to get me out of the house. So it was the summer of 1981 when the major league players were about to go on strike. And rather than just sit at home and mope about not being able to go see the Dodgers or the Angels with my mother, I called up the league and just slightly exaggerated my non-existent credentials. And they must have been extremely desperate because they hired me over the phone, sight unseen. And I showed up at the office, and like Kelly, they handed me a mask and a balloon chest protector and a pair of shin guards and said, "Thank you very much. Here you go."
Wow.
And I got a pretty rude awakening that first game I worked, because I had the best of intentions, but no training and no experience. And it was a bit of a shock. But luckily the shock wasn't the kind that made me want to crawl into a corner and quit. It was more the kind of wanting to get to the bottom of why human beings think that putting on a baseball uniform entitles them to behave in such peculiar ways.
Sure.
And so literally the next day I sent away applications to the 2 umpire schools and decided to go to Wendelstedt, and made my wonderful twin sister Warren go with me, so I wouldn't be the only woman in the class of 180 students. And she was my first steady partner and my rock in Gibraltar. And it's really important to have those family relationships and that support from
Sure.
people in your immediate sphere, because there's so much about umpiring, especially when you're new to it, that invites criticism and contempt and lack of support. It's what I call the great paradox of umpiring, that just at the point in a career when encouragement and support is needed the most, which is at the beginning of an umpire's career, is when they get the least of it because of the lack of experience. So, but that's to me one of the beautiful mysteries of umpiring in a baseball sense. It's one of the things that keeps me interested in umpiring after 40 years, because I'm still trying to figure out human nature, and I don't think I'll ever do it.
One thing that sticks out to me right away on all 3 replies or answers is you love the game, you have passion, you have drive. And to get to where you have been and are going, you got to love what you're doing, number one. You have to have passion and you have to have drive. So that's one thing that jumps out right away back to me through the computer, is you absolutely love what you're doing. So let's talk about the path, the barriers that you had to overcome, how you overcame them. And I kind of know the answer to that is because you're damn good umpires. That's pretty well it. So, but let's talk about, Lisa, let's talk about your journey. Let's talk about just Baseball Canada. You've worked over 21 national championships, including 2 men's senior national championships. I've worked 1, but you know what? It's so impressive that what you've done. And if I can tell you a quick story, when I moved back from the UK, I was having a hard time getting a hold of someone to say, "Hey, I'm back in Ontario." So I went on the Ontario Baseball website and I looked at everybody who was in charge. And I phoned Lisa Turbitt up. And in 20 minutes, the guy where I was living called me. So women can get stuff done a lot quicker than men. That's what I'm going to say, because they make things happen. And Lisa, I'll always thank you for that. But let's talk about your journey, Lisa. Go ahead.
My journey with Baseball Canada?
Your whole journey.
Well, I'll start with one little part and then maybe we'll fast forward. A big question is obviously about barriers. And I know some people ask about those questions. Kelly and Perry and I may have different stories, but they all have the same thread. You've had some other umpires on that have talked about their journey. It's not easy being an umpire, male or female, amateur, professional, little league. They all work really hard. It's not an easy job. And, but we'd be lying if we said sometimes those barriers are different, or maybe just keep repeating. You never really seem to get over it. Right. When I started, I mentioned the story about my brother and the T-ball, and I was able to continue doing the basic house league. But when I tried to attend the higher training camps to go to umpire rep baseball in Ontario, I was turned down twice. and I went home 2 times, but I continued to umpire just locally. And then finally, when I attended that camp, and when I tell that story to a lot of people, they get upset. I can't believe you got sent home. We know that Kelly talked about not being able to play baseball, that there's a lot of limits and mindsets. And, you know, this story goes on and on. I went here, they didn't want you there. You went there, they didn't want you there. It's the same thread. But I'm still here, and
Yep.
Perry's still here, and Kelly's still here. So when people ask the question, you know, how do you overcome those barriers? You can't go home. If you choose to quit umpiring, male or female, it always should be on your terms, not because someone made you quit.
Right.
And that's been my philosophy. So as a young umpire, when that happened, everyone said, well, when they sent you home from the advanced class, why didn't you quit? I'm like, why would I quit? You know, my love for this is more important than some of the obstacles in the way. And so that was my start. And then I've been a part of Baseball Canada. And as you said, a number of nationals, not only as an umpire, but as a supervisor.
Right.
Obviously, when I first did it, Perry talked about a lot of firsts. And, you know, there's been a lot of first, but there's been a lot of other women that have followed that have had some firsts as well. Last year in Canada, we had 6 different women umpire in our 16U girls national tournament, and 6 women umpire in a male, different divisions all the way up in a male. So we had 12 different women working baseball championships in Canada last year. And so all those years ago, those barriers in the way, we keep breaking those barriers down and making room and path to make it so there's not so many firsts, there's more people. So those are some of the challenges that I face, but with some good results, I think, right now.
So that's really cool to know. Kelly, I talked to you on the phone quite a few times, and I always make a joke. Hey, I'm talking to the Little League World Series plate umpire. And you're going, you know, all the other, like the guys way up there. And I go, but you know what? You're the Little League plate person. And I'm going, and I know you. And I think that's so cool. So tell me about your story.
You know, I really, when I decided to start umpiring, I was really fortunate. I truly walked down to a field called The Hole in Talmadge, Ohio. And there was a district Little League game being played. And I waited for the 4-man umpire crew to come off. And for some of you that know me, you know this is typical of me. I literally walked right up to them on the sidewalk, and they couldn't get around me except to walk in the grass around me. And they stopped, and I stuck my hand out and I said, hey, I'm Kelly Dine. I'd love to do what you do. I want to umpire. Wow. And God bless him, Dale West, he did not miss a beat. He just stopped, and this grin just spread over his face, and he looked at me and he's like, well, all right, when do you want to start? And I'm like, now. Wow. And, you know, that was really incredible to have that kind of support from the very beginning. And then, you know, after starting with baseball, I quickly got pulled into softball. But, you know, baseball was my first love. And after my husband got sick and we decided, you know, to look at our life priorities, I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to do baseball. So I actually went back basically down to the bottom. I was working Little League, but I hadn't really had much experience in high school. And I knew that I wanted to work college baseball. So though I started looking for every camp that I could, you know, asking more questions, working more games, trying to get as much experience as I could. And, you know, I'm just blessed. I've had a ton of supporters along the way. People have just lifted me up, and, you know, and they didn't care about my gender. They just wanted to make me better, you know, and it wasn't just me. It was every guy that was at the camp with me. You know, those instructors were there to just make us better.
Hey, if you can work, you can work. And I work with Lisa. So, and you know what? She knows what she's doing. And I learned from her. And that's a 59-year-old man talking about a person who's my friend, but can umpire. And, you know, her resume just proves that. So, hey, Perry, same question for you. Tell me about how you got into umpiring.
Well, I started in Little League, where a lot of people start, and quickly decided that the reason that people were criticizing me so vociferously, including writing letters to the local paper about how bad I was, and please pray do not let that woman ever come back again. And I decided right away, I'm not going to take it personally, because actually they were right. I wasn't very as good as my intentions were. I just didn't have the training. So I went to umpire school, Harry Wendelstedt, in 1982. Phil Cuzzy was my classmate.
Wow.
And he was my classmate in 1983. And he was my classmate in 1984. And he was my classmate in 1985, at the end of which he finally got a job. And I went back to doing college and high school and have continued on ever since. It didn't upset me at all that I wasn't picked to go into pro ball. That's a very tough life. And I tip my cap to anybody that embarks upon that particular job, because it is, you have to be willing to put up with a lot and sacrifice a lot to get to the major leagues. So,
Sure.
and so I had other options, thankfully. And one of them was to just develop my own niche in umpiring. And I did that by going down to Florida early in the year instead of staying in New York, where I was living and had grown up. I would go down to Florida in December and January and work tournaments, and then colleges come down, and then I got into doing spring training games. And so being in Florida when the winter months mitigate against playing up north, gave me a lot of experience that I needed to gain confidence and to start thinking that, you know, I could do something. And of course, I had a lot of ambition when I had sturdy knees. Now my knees aren't that sturdy. Thankfully, they're still mobile. But my ambition has shifted from one of personal aggrandizement to one of a more all-encompassing viewpoint, that there are lots of other women that would love to do what I do and would love to do what I have done. And there's no reason why they can't anymore, because of women like Lisa and Kelly, who have followed in that timeline and are, you know, themselves now being held up as role models for younger umpires. So it's all, you know, sort of one Mobius strip or Mebius strip, however you say it. Each of us preparing, you know, the next path for somebody else to make it just a little bit easier. And it finally is becoming that way, because for a long time, no matter how there were, up until I started umpiring in 1981, I think there were only 3 women that had been in professional baseball at that point: Pam Postema, Christine Wren, and Bernard Era. And they had just a wretched time of it. They were treated very shabbily, and even all the way up to Ria Cortizio. But each one of us has made it just a little bit easier for the next one. And so that's my role, to, you know, to make it easier for somebody, to help as much as I can, although I don't do it nearly on the scale that Lisa or Kelly does, you know, the magnitude of the games that they work. And I'm content to do my high school games and work with Baseball for All, working the girls tournaments, and once in a while, you know, luck into an assignment working Mets spring training or the Women's World Cup, which I also remember. Lisa, you were there, right, in 2018 or no?
In 2018,
I can't.
I was supervising the WBSC U15, and Gus was at the
That's right.
the
That's right.
previous tournament.
That's,
I supervised the Women's World Cup in South Korea.
oops. That's right. I think I saw you at one of Justine's tournaments in Rockford then.
Correct.
Was where I saw you last
We've
time.
umpired
So-
twice together.
So So Lisa has trained and been a role model to literally thousands of girls and women up in Canada. And I am just so grateful for her. Thank you, Lisa, for what you do, because you really have caused a cultural shift in the way people view women umpires. We're not aliens anymore, and we're not viewed with immediate suspicion just because we're out there. You know, we're given the benefit of the doubt more often than not, I think. And it's because of the groundwork that you have laid, and of the groundwork that you are now laying also, Kelly. So thank both of you very much for that. It helps me because I'm 67 years old. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I started umpiring late when I was 28 years old. And I'm just, 40 years I've been umpiring this year. And for the first 30, it seemed like there was no hope, that I was alone and that things would never change. And in the last 10 years, getting to know it, well, you and I go back to 2006, that's 14 years now. Just that sea shift in the attitudes because of the work, the hard work that you have put into just being the best umpire that you can. I'm starting to get a little choked up. So,
That's all right. So
thank you, both of you.
I have a question for all three of you. Last night, Jansen Vistani, we covered this about female umpires, and we were talking about tonight's show. But I offered it up to Jansen, and he said in his lifetime, which could be his career at the MLB level, he may see a female umpire get hired full time. What are your thoughts on that? I'll start with Lisa. Lisa?
Yes.
That'll be fantastic. I tuned in to watch last night, so I did hear him say that. I think that the opportunities to train, I know MLB does a lot of stuff with creating opportunities, having camps. I was at a camp in 2007. And so there's a number of those opportunities going on. And I think his mindset and some of the umpires that I've worked with is if you can do the job, you can do the job. And I think that, that's the mindset of MLB. And I think it's great. There may be women watching, young women right now who are watching and saying, hey, you know what, that's an opportunity that's maybe there for me, and they can take advantage of it. And all three of us will be cheering as loudly as we can.
Yeah.
Kelly, for you?
Absolutely. 2 years ago, I was fortunate to go down to the pro umpire camp for 5 days over Christmas break, and really fortunate to meet Chris Jones and Rich Rieker, and I wasn't there as a prospect for pro school, but I was there really to talk about promoting a lot more diversity, up through the ranks. And Jen Powell and Emma Charlesworth-Seiler are two very, very good friends of mine. I look up to both of them. They both have really mentored me and been available to me for questions as well. And, I look at them and what they're working through now in minor league ball, and I'm just, go for it. They're outstanding umpires. Those two women work harder than anyone I know, but I know they're not going to be alone, and there are more coming through, and we just need to keep encouraging them because it's definitely going to happen for sure.
Okay. Perry Barber, you're quoted as saying you'll either be carried off the field because you've just ran out of gas and can't do it anymore, or if a female umpire gets hired in MLB, you'll quit. Is that true?
Oh, did I say I would quit no, I don't. I said I would walk off the field, but not meaning that I would definitely, but
Okay.
At that point I would feel confident enough that all of my years and efforts were not going for naught, that I would be satisfied at that point if my career ended at that moment. But hell, they're going to have to wheel me off, Ray. I'm sorry. I'm not quitting until I just can't do it anymore. And right now I can still do it pretty good. So why not?
So it's safe to say-
all I'm doing right now is sitting around eating bonbons and putting on weight. You know, I need to get out there. You see, I'm wearing my umpire shirt. I'm ready to go to work. Hi, Archie.
I think it's safe to say that you're looking forward one day to two managers coming across the diamond, handing a lineup card to a woman at the MLB level.
I will be there for that whenever that happens. And I predict that if their career trajectories resume in the normal fashion, that Emma and Jen, either or both of them, may be call-ups within the next 5 to 6 years.
Wow.
So we'll see. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that.
Okay,
There's no reason why it shouldn't happen because they're both excellent.
I'm going to get Tommy to, we're going to take some questions from the audience. You guys good for that?
Sure.
Ooh, questions. Ooh, yeah.
Tommy?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's ask a question for all three of you. This comes from Ryan O'Connor. My question would be directed towards all three. Who or what was your driving force to wanting to become an umpire? Let's not all answer at once,
I'll
ladies.
start. Okay, I'll start. It was my mother. She was the one who suggested it to me. And when she did, I looked at her like she was out of her mind.
Fantastic.
But after thinking about it for a few minutes, I decided, well, it actually does kind of make sense. And although she was sort of horrified that I quickly kind of dove in head first instead of, you know, being an umpire for a year or two and then getting it out of my system, you know, she was always hoping I'd settle down and get a real job and have kids, but she never complained when I invited her to Florida to watch me work Mets spring training games.
Hey,
So
Terry,
that part of it.
Terry, think about it this way. I'm going to do this for your mom right now because she was actually breaking a barrier back then by getting you to go umpire. I think that's amazing. Perfect.
She was. My mother was amazing. Thank you for acknowledging that, Ray. She was absolutely. And to this day, I do not know. I doubt that I would have thought of umpiring myself, of calling a little league and saying I'd like to umpire, if she had not planted that seed in my. Because at the moment she suggested, like I said, I thought she was a lunatic. Why would I want to do that? But the moment that I started doing it, I found out why. And I think that somehow she knew that her debutante daughter needed some kind of kick in the tuchus, and umpiring gave it to me. So.
Okay, Kelly.
You know, I didn't have anybody in particular that, you know, encouraged me to go into umpiring. I mean, I literally walked across a ball field and saw a hole that needed to be filled. But I think I had that maybe strength to do that. No, strength's not even the right word. You know, my parents both, my dad, he was so into sports and he was a very technical oriented man. He was an engineer. And, you know, he made sure that my brother and I were treated equally. I didn't know any differently about, you know, female sports or male sports or Title IX. I didn't know anything about that because I was always just out there in athletics with my brother and my dad and my mom. You know, and my dad tried out as an NFL referee, and he had come home from World War II. He was much older than my mom, and he and three of his buddies in Pittsburgh went and tried out, and they were all offered jobs. And unfortunately, my dad and one of the other three men decided not to take that job, and he regretted that the rest of his life. But you know, I looked to somebody like my mom, and when we were outside playing football, my mom was the center. So she was coming in and her shins were bruised, and you know, here she is cooking dinner then for us after she's wiping the mud off of her legs. And that's the role model that I grew up with. So I didn't know any differently. I didn't know that there was anything I couldn't do. And you know, and then once I started umpiring, it, like I said, I just had a ton of supporters since then. So it's been awesome.
Before I get to Lisa, I talked about Perry and her mom. Wow, like seeing something that, hey, this might be good, pushing her, get out there. And then I saw Perry, what she was doing. I was watching her. I've been watching you talk about how you did it. And I know Lisa from when she's up there working or actually teaching a class. One word that comes right to my heart is confidence. You guys absolutely oozes out of you. And that's, you can't teach that. And I think that's another positive thing. And how you're doing this is because just without even a simple question, the amount of confidence that you, all three of you, show is incredible. So Lisa, you're up next. Go ahead.
I think that one of the challenges when I first started, I love hearing Kelly's story, how everyone was so positive. I'm envious because that wasn't always the case for me. Sometimes outright trying to hold you back. But I think sometimes the one that's the most hard to overcome is the kindness, where they think that they know best. You shouldn't umpire because it's not for girls. It's going to cause a problem. And, you know, we don't want you to get hurt. And when I was a young umpire, there was in the baseball league, because there weren't a lot of girls playing then. They were playing on a boys team. There wasn't the leagues that we have now, but they would go to my dad and put pressure on my dad. Why is she umpiring? You need to convince her not to. You need to, you know, it's for the best. She's going to get hurt. And for me, what, you know, and I'm even getting emotional now, is the thought of them trying to take it away. You asked what made us have the drive. When they were going to maybe take it away, I'm like, you're not going to take it away from me.
Right.
So that lit the fire inside of me, because maybe, I don't know, it would have been amazing to have a journey like Kelly or like Perry, where everybody was supportive. I'm not saying that they weren't supportive and that they were openly, but when they,
Everybody wasn't supportive.
yeah, they try to say, we know what's best and girls don't do this. And so then it's hard when those people, and I was a kid, right? I was only 11 when I started. So that was hard because I'm like, they're going to make me stop. That's where the fire was. I'm like, you better just watch me because I'm going to do this. And here I am now.
It's fascinating that that's what, as a species, we do to each other. Especially when I look at, when I see Lisa working now or teaching a class or instructing at a clinic that I'm at, it's like all those people who, I wish they could see you now, because all those Neanderthals are long gone, most of them. And it's really heartbreaking to see you get emotional there, because I know you as like, you're a damn good umpire, and you climbed a ladder that, you know what, I'm happy where I am in Baseball Canada. I'm happy in the league that I work here in Ontario. I'm happy I get to go to Florida to the umpire camps and meet guys and do stuff like that. But your career is like it's just gone all the way up the hill. It's fascinating.
But Ray, I think I'm just going to add one more point. Sure. Is in the stuff that Perry and Kelly and what I'm doing is, I mentioned that I'm a school teacher, and although this particular story is about umpiring, this is a great message to my kids. When we have conversations at school, although my story is about baseball, it's about somebody else limiting your dreams. You know, we had a community police officer come into the school and talk about how her mom kindly advised she shouldn't become a police officer because that wasn't at the time what women do, and she became a police officer anyway. My kids at school, kids anywhere, and young umpires that Perry and Kelly and I meet are inspired by those stories. Maybe they don't want to grow up and be an umpire, but they might be able to if they want to. Maybe they're going to grow up and be an astronaut like Chris Hadfield and other famous astronauts. But maybe they're just going to be something that someone thinks, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that. I don't think we should limit other people's dreams. If I could go back and tell my young self like one piece of advice, dream big. Because I always thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to do that. If I could go back, I'd be like, do it all.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in looking, you know, I'm aiming for this, but let's say aim for the stars, but you landed on the moon. You got somewhere, right? So I think you have to have a plan. So that's fascinating. It really is. All three stories are similar but different, but they're all comes down to, you broke down a lot of barriers and you just said, screw it, I'm going to keep working hard, and I'm going to, and like you said, no one's going to take this away. So Tommy, you got any more questions?
Oh yeah, we got several. So let me ask another one of all of them. So what has been the most memorable game, either as a base umpire or plate umpire, for each of you? We already know what Kelly's is going to be, but go ahead. Maybe I'm wrong, but.
Well, let's hear you, Kelly.
I believe it or not, I kind of categorize them a little bit. Absolutely, the Little League World Series, you know, last year was wow. I'm speechless. I mean, I can't even tell you how amazing that experience it was. But you know, I think also hearing Scott Taylor for the first time say, "Congratulations, you're hired." That I'll never forget that. And working my first college game, that was pretty huge for me. That working my first D1 game, that was also pretty huge for me. So yeah, I don't think I can name one game.
What about that award you just got?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Umpire of the Year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Kelly, question about Little League though, and it's always a question everybody asks is, were you ever asked to change your style of how you call your strikes as a plate umpire for Little League during your World Series stint, or did they let you be your own personality out there as opposed to the hammer compared to a point? That was a question somebody had.
Got it. I've always been a hammer. I've worked and played around with it. I tried to do the point a few times. And honestly, I just had feedback from some of my peers who are like, you know what, I love your hammer. Your hammer looks great. So I've always been a hammer. And no, when we went to our orientation for the Little League World Series, you know, Tom Rawlings was leading the mentor crew, and he said, you know, do what got you here. And so they may have had a little bit of feedback for some of the umpires, but nobody came right out and said, hey, I need you to change this, or I need you to change that. At least certainly not for me. So no.
Barry?
Yeah, I think Lisa mentioned that I had a lot of support, which is true, but I had at least as much resistance, shall we say, and people always trying to put their 2 cents in worth about, you know, why I shouldn't be doing this. And oh my gosh, I remember a conversation I had with Frank Pulley in the tunnel underneath Shea Stadium, and he was saying, well, why do you want to do this? I said, because I love it. And he said, well, you can't do it because there's too much travel involved. Like a woman had never traveled farther than 5 miles from her home, you know? And well, what do you think the other umpires' wives will say? And I mean, I won't tell you the answer that I told him, but it took him aback, shall we say.
Sure.
But, you know, people are always trying to think up reasons why other people can and shouldn't be doing stuff. Frankly, I don't know why anybody ever tries to run somebody else's life or, you know, give them advice about how to run theirs when they can't run their own, and most of the time. So
Barry, what was
I
your
always
most,
took it with
what was your most
my most
memorable
memorable game. Well, probably my very first game working with my sister in Little League, my
Wow.
twin sister. And then 32 years later, working with her son, my nephew, at a Mets game right after he graduated from umpire school. So those are 2 outstanding memories.
That's
And
nice.
my other one that I would say is the 2008 crew that I assembled for a Mets spring training game that comprised 4 women.
Right.
It was Teresa Fairlady, Mona Osborne, Isla Valcrcel, and me. And as to the best of my knowledge, that hasn't happened before or since. I can't believe it's been 12 years. But every time the Mets called me to get umpires for intra-squads or something, every time after that, they wouldn't want 4 umpires. They'd just say, bring us 2 or bring us 3. So I haven't had the opportunity since then to do that, but it's going to happen again at
Sure.
some point. I have the feeling.
All right. Tommy?
All right. Did Lisa answer her favorite game?
No, Lisa, sorry. Your favorite game?
I feel a little bit like Kelly in that I have a few favorites for different reasons. Maybe I'll start with my almost most favorite game, which would have been the game I was assigned at the World Baseball Classic qualifier. I was scheduled to do the opening plate of the tournament, but obviously we were sent home because of COVID. So that one I'll just have to dream about for another day.
Yeah.
The almost game. But for different reasons, like what Kelly said, you know, I did the gold medal plate in the inaugural Women's World Cup in 2004. That was Dick Runge was my supervisor, College World Series umpire from the US.
Yeah.
And he was there, and that was an amazing experience. I did umpire the Women's World Series in 2001 up here in Toronto, which Jen Powell was a player.
Yeah.
She was a catcher for Team USA. My bronze medal plates were pretty special in the senior men's tournament. When I went to that tournament, it was the first time in Canada we had a woman umpire at that level. I did an IBL game with 2 other umpires that Ray has umpired with in our inter-county baseball league up here in Canada. We have a number of women who have umpired. I think we're at 6 or 7 who have umpired in the league's history. And the scheduler, Andy Harrington, at the time, scheduled it so the 3 of us, we live in different parts of the province, would umpire together. So that was a regulation game in that independent league we have here in Canada. And so we had an all-female crew. Not quite the spring training game that Perry did, but In that league, they had a number of players who played in the World Baseball Classic for their countries. We have a lot of players from outside of Canada who play in the league. So for Taylor and Elise and I, that was a pretty awesome day. So a few for different reasons. It's like trying to pick your favorite child, right? So I can't pick just one.
Sophie's choice, not fair.
Bobby?
All right, so there's some questions here that are aimed individually now. So let's go ahead and go to Lisa. Tim Meyer asks, how did you become a WBSC umpire coordinator? Did you get approached, or was it something that you pursued?
Awesome. Shout out to Tim and to the other people I know who are on the webinar right now. So I umpired for WBSC a number of times, one of them with Perry when we went to Taiwan. But I was approached by the current umpire director of WBSC, which is Gus Rodriguez from USA. So he approached me about asking me to supervise. I do supervise here in Canada and run clinics. I run some clinics with a hometown friend of mine, Steve Jasinski. He ran a camp up here, and I do them for Baseball Ontario and Baseball Canada. So being a supervisor already created an opportunity for me to become an umpire director. And so when Gus approached me and asked me to join the commission and become a supervisor, umpire director, they call it at WBSC at the international level, I was thrilled. It was an amazing opportunity. The first tournament I went to was the Women's World Cup in 2016. And I then went to the University Games, and I've supervised the U15 in Panama with Tim and the U12 last year in Taiwan. So all of those tournaments had both male and female umpires at them. WBSC has done an amazing job. Every level, women's, U12, U15, U18, U21, then it switched to U23, has had women umpire in it, and I've been the umpire director of 3 of them. So it was a great opportunity. So I was approached, but if somebody was interested, that might be something, if they're already an international umpire, that might be something supervising or helping with clinics might be something that they could do in future. So
Yeah. So just that, what everyone's seeing the photograph, the young man on the right is actually my guest next weekend. I've known him since he was a little kid, and so is Lisa. And he's actually now a AA umpire. This would have been his first season in AA, Steve Jasinski. And
Wow.
Lisa was explaining to me that's his first year umpiring when he was, rookie of the year?
he was junior umpire of the year.
Yeah.
And that was in our hometown,
Nice.
Burlington. And I was senior umpire of the year and Steve was junior umpire of the year. And so when Ray asked me about this tonight and I saw Steve was going to be the guest next week, I'm like, I got to send this picture.
That is priceless. So I'm actually going to use that next week. Tommy?
All right. The next question is for, let's see, Kelly. Kelly, this is from S. James Archangel. Do you feel your military background has had an important influence in adapting to the ever-changing aspects and disciplines of umpiring?
Good question.
Oh, absolutely. I do. You know, the military, we were just talking about this for school with the pandemic and having all of our students at home. We've got a lot of students that are thinking about next steps. And so we were asked in our district to create a Flipgrid or a little video about our military experience. And I'll tell you what, you know, not just what I learned in the military, but, you know, some of those things that you don't realize are being ingrained into you until you use them in some other arena like officiating. So, you know, Ray, you talked a little bit about confidence, and really, I think every umpire out there has to have confidence to do a good job, you know, not male or female. And so some of that came from the military. You know, I think sometimes I don't really necessarily talk about the barriers or any of the hurdles that I've overcome, probably because I've been doing it my whole life, you know, and it's just something natural to me. And I think I told myself a long, long time ago that I wasn't going to spend negative energy worrying about somebody who was trying to hold me back, that I would rather just celebrate, you know, the positives of the people that would support me. But, you know, I think I look back at my military time, and when I was at the Naval Academy, we were given an opportunity to try out for different arenas over the summer. They called them cruises, you know, for lack of a better word. And I wanted to go to dive school. I was a D1 swimmer in college at the Naval Academy. And I was determined I was going to go to dive school because I had experience with open water swimming. I was one of only 4 women that were lifeguarding on Presque Isle, which is Lake Erie. And Lake Erie is could be a really dangerous type lake because of how shallow it is. And so the bottom line was there was a large number of us, 60 of us, that had tried out for dive school. And me and another girl had actually made it. We were in the top 20, and I think I was at like number 6, and this other girl was a little bit lower on the list. And we were so excited, thinking that that's where we were going for the summer, that we'd be working with, SEALs who were going through dive school. And the next thing you know, this girl and I both got a letter that said that I'm sorry that we would not be able to attend dive school and that we'd be reassigned to a ship for the cruise. And the reason they gave us was because we wore corrective lenses. Well, we also learned that of the 20 guys that were now going, that there was about 12 of them that wore corrective lenses. So, it's an experience like that that I realized what was happening and why I wasn't allowed to go. But, you just make the best of it and you keep moving on. And so every time that I hit a barrier, even in officiating, a coach or a player or a peer or somebody who just didn't think I belonged, it just made me work harder to prove them wrong. So.
There you go. Exactly.
Tommy?
All right, so this question comes from Tommy Owens, me. How was Alex Trebek in person, Perry?
Good Canadian boy.
I have a bone. I have a bone to pick with Alex. He made fun of me when I went back several decades after my appearance, because my twin sister was also on Jeopardy after I was on. She was not a champion, but she said something during the interview that she kind of messed up a little bit. So it didn't translate as the way I wanted it to. So 30 years later, I went back to a taping and sat in the audience and said the saying that I had taught my sister to say that she had not said the way I wanted her to. And Alex Trebek listened to me say it, and he looked at me and he said, "Perry, you're still weird." Because during his interview with my sister, she had said that I made up the saying, and he looked at her and he said, "You've got a weird sister. I've got one too." So 30 years later, he said, "You're still weird," which I appreciate him. But I got to tell you, I love him regardless. Nobody comes between me and my Alex, except you, because I'm here. Somebody usually calls me with the Final Jeopardy clue because I don't have TV where I am quarantined right now. But I have to make sacrifices sometimes, and for you, I'm happy to do it.
Appreciate it. Tommy?
And
All right, so
he was very, very nice, very professional.
All right, so we got 4 last questions. We have one for all of you, and then there'll be one for Kelly, and then one more for that's more of a comment. So let's go with the first one. This is from Jim Knight. What is the worst injury that you've encountered since you've been umpiring?
Anybody?
Oh, when I got nailed in the ankle and was off work actually it was in the knee, and I was on crutches for a month. I think that was probably the worst. But I've had broken fingers. I had my collarbone broken by a foul ball, and I was so into the game, I just slapped ice on it and didn't even realize it was fractured until the next day when I got x-rays. But we've all taken our lumps back there, trust me, but we're tough. And Kelly and Lisa, I haven't given birth, but most women do. And that probably is the best illustration of our physical toughness that I can think of. That and being back there behind the plate. So, and being in the service, Kelly, as well. And being a teacher, Lisa.
Lisa?
I would say concussion, probably the worst. Same thing. I've had some terrible bruises, the color of all 3 of our shirts, terrible bruises, but the concussion was the worst. I'm like any concussion, right?
Yeah.
If it's male or female.
Yeah.
Kelly?
I think for me,
very dangerous.
I don't know. I don't ever play down concussions. I'm guessing I had my share of mine, but the one injury I remember sticking out to me was the one that taught me that normally I will go hands on knees, and I needed to adjust my hands on knees behind the plate depending on the age level. And so I was working a younger game, and I took a fastball to my forearm, and to the point that it just swelled so bad within 2 pitches, I couldn't feel my hand. I couldn't even hold my indicator anymore. And then at that point, I had to put the indicator in my bag. I literally couldn't hold it. My hand was just kind of like this. And the rest of the game, when I was trying to show balls and strikes, that was I had to come up with something unique because I couldn't make my hand work. So,
Kelly, what do you do in your spare time?
me?
Yeah, Kelly.
Oh gosh. Like Lisa, I'm a teacher in high school. But I love everything. I keep busy doing a number of things. I'm an American Diabetes Association advocate. Our youngest son has type 1 diabetes. So I do a lot of that. I love volunteering, volunteerism, not just for the Little League and not just for American Diabetes Association. So I really strive to get my high school students into volunteering and teaching them the value of community service projects. So constantly trying to drive them towards, looking at how they can help out in their communities, not just in the school. I love sports of all kinds. I mean, I really wanted to be the first Hannah Storm. So, I will watch football religiously. My older sons are both rugby players. Put me in front of any sporting event and I'll just sit and watch it. But baseball is my first love. So I'll watch baseball night and day. And
tell me about
music.
tell me about your volunteering at a transitional housing facility for veterans.
Oh, well, that I think you're
that's
talking
fantastic.
about, the Harry Donovan Jr. Valor Home in Akron. It's an amazing facility. It's a nonprofit, and what they do is they take in previously homeless veterans, and they have about 35 residents, male residents living there at any one time. And the Valor Home is a very intense rehabilitational facility where they provide daily therapies to the residents. The guys can have a variety. So like maybe Mondays will be art therapy and Tuesdays are music therapy. They do anger management therapy. They assign them a caseworker and they teach the guys everything from how to buy a bus pass to job interviewing skills, how to make a meal for yourself, with the goal that someday when they're able to move from the transitional housing, they can get their apartment on their own and move back into society, being able to address the things that led to their homelessness in the first place. But it is 100% veterans that are living there. So I take my students, I have a lot of refugee students in our building. We're the most diverse high school in the state of Ohio. And so it really feels good to them. Most of them grew up in refugee camps in Myanmar and Nepal and other regions of the world. And now they're here. Our district is 100% high need, which means our students all receive free breakfast and free lunch. About 50% of the students are from refugee camps and the other 50% grew up right here in Akron. But, to take students who don't realize perhaps maybe how little they have and what little they do have, they're willing to give to someone else in need, like these veterans at the Valor Home, is just the most rewarding thing ever.
So not only did you serve your country, you're still serving it as a volunteer. So, ma'am, that's really impressive. And I want to say thanks for doing that. Perry, this is for you.
So do I.
What's that?
Thank you.
Oh, Perry's right there.
I said, so do I want to thank you,
So,
Kelly.
Perry, you're the director of the Women's Services for the APBEPA. What do you do there?
It is a recently created post, and I am navigating my way through figuring that out right now.
Okay.
I also serve on the board of the International Women's Baseball Center. I've been doing that for 6 years now. And we work with Justine Siegel to sponsor girls' baseball tournaments and events like the Pending Marshall celebration in Rockford, Illinois,
Nice.
a couple of years ago, where thousands of people turned out. Oh, it was amazing. A weekend long celebration, capped off by MLB doing an event that they call Play Ball, for which hundreds of kids in Rockford showed up on a gray Sunday morning. And it had to be shortened by rain. But it still turned out to be a great event. And anyway, so I'm very busy with that, and also with working with Jennifer Madison, the president of the APBPA, on helping her organization navigate through these very stressful times, because she does wonderful work supporting almost 40 families and individual ball players who don't fall under the pension plan or the BAT program that helps a lot of major league ball players.
Yeah.
Her organization is primarily about helping minor league ball players who don't have the resources or the fallbacks that the major league ball players do. And it's really amazing what she does to help them. And so she's been nice enough to take me in during this quarantining period. And you can see the background. I'm sitting here with this beautiful scenery behind me in northern Phoenix, up in the canyons, where we're pretty removed from a lot of people anyway. So I felt very safe and removed from anything that could cause me any problems getting the virus, because I have upper respiratory problems anyway. So I don't want to get it. Definitely don't want to get it. Although I think I might have had it during January. I was actually pretty sick back then, but who knows?
So in your umpiring career, you've also umpired in the Cape Cod League and the Alaskan Summer League in the same year?
Yes.
Wow. That's
no, I was only in the Alaska. No, I worked in the Cape Cod League for about 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
I think 2004 to about 2011.
Yeah.
And then I worked I skipped a year and went to Alaska in 2009.
So did you get to
I loved it.
Did you get to do
No,
the
no,
Midnight Sun game?
I came after the Midnight Sun game, yeah.
Okay.
But I've heard that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I loved it up there because I'm a night owl anyway. I don't mind that there's no darkness. So I stay up all night a lot of the time anyway.
And in your umpire career, you were also the first woman umpire supervisor and the signer for the Independent Atlantic League. How long did you do that for?
I did it for the first 4 years of the league's existence.
Wow.
When the president was Joe Klein, who had been a general manager for the Tigers and I think the Texas Rangers. And he just came up with this brilliant concept and turned it into a pretty successful independent league that I think still remains the premier independent league in the country. And the first 4 years I were there, they were getting very high quality players.
Yeah.
Major league players either on the way up or rehabbing and hoping to get called back up, things like that. So it was a great experience for me. And I had a fabulous time until I started to butt heads with the league owner, the owner or the CEO. And it wasn't just me. He didn't like umpires in general, but my priorities changed right after 9/11 anyway,
Sure.
shall we say. I became a legal guardian to a teenager, and I was homeschooling him, and I just focused on other things after that. But it was a wonderful 4 years, loved it. And Joe Klein was a prince among men. He stood up for me, and we all need that. We need our male allies. And thank you, Ray, for being such a great one. Really appreciate it. It's very important in this cultural shift that I was talking about for men with your platform and your stature to talk about us and make use of us in a way that gives us the chance to present ourselves as professional and, to the point and, not in it for ourselves, but in it to help other people, boys, girls, men, women, so that they know that there are people that, we really ran up against these obstacles, and some of them were pretty brutal, frankly. But we found another way, and we have enjoyed just about every minute of it in spite of those obstacles. And there's always something valuable to be learned from the mistakes that you make and the obstacles that you run up against. So that's what I think all of us have tried to keep perspective on.
Yeah, I think
of our careers. It's helped.
All three of you have a story to tell, and I'm so glad we can tell it because, I'm reaching 5,000 people, but that those 5,000 people are going to share your story with some other people. So I want to ask Lisa, and I'm looking at your complete baseball resume on my wall. I see what you do baseball wise, and I know some of the things you do away from baseball, but tell me about all the stuff you do, because I know you've been involved in like doing volunteer things and doing runs and hikes. So you're up, Lisa, go ahead.
Thanks, Ray. I coached baseball locally. I coached at school. I used to coach volleyball. I've actually done a number of triathlons, believe it or not. I wasn't very good. I didn't win, but I did them. One of the things,
Wow.
when Kelly was talking about refugees, we have a number of students who are refugees to Canada at my school, and we have a very diverse population. And it's interesting because I was mentioning earlier, sharing one of my baseball stories at school. We have a very diverse population, and we have a large group of Muslim students. And traditionally in Muslim culture, the moms told me that they don't play or participate in sports.
Wow.
They decided they wanted to learn to play baseball. And in their kids going home and telling the stories about Miss T at school, the moms approached me, and they had started this fledgling pickup league and asked me, could I come and umpire? They were trying to kind of playing a hybrid softball. You know, they didn't know the rules. When the ball would go out of play, they would be still running. So they're like, we need an umpire who's forgiving because we don't really know how to play. And it's been one of the most rewarding experiences that I've ever been a part of. Watching these women fall in love with baseball, like Perry and Kelly and I have both shared, has been amazing. And they've evolved from that 2 little pickup teams. They were recently featured on the CBC up here, and they have a huge 8-team league. They are amazing. And watching them fall in love with the game, but develop their skills. Many of them are now playing in integrated leagues in their communities. But their big message was they wanted their kids, boys and girls, to grow up seeing their moms as athletes, as players. And so having the opportunity to work with those women at a sport that I love, but something that was new to them for their culture and living in Canada, and now they're passing that on to their children, was amazing. It was an amazing experience for me. And it was also great for our community because we had a lot of families who were maybe hesitant to connect with other families, and we were able to connect through the sport, and it created a lot of lines of communication and connections for people. So it was amazing.
Excellent.
Oh, that's so
Tommy, you
beautiful.
got anything?
Yep, I got one question for Kelly, and then I have a question from Brian Henry. So, Kelly, Kyle Albert asks, what was it like when you got selected to the Little League World Series and got that letter in the mail?
Wow, that was incredible, and that's another moment I won't really ever forget. That I was home. It was over Christmas break, and I don't normally get the mail because I'm working during the day, and decided, hey, I'll go out and get the mail today. And it was snowing, and went out there to the mailbox and was flipping through the mail as I was walking back up the driveway, and saw this little thin letter with the Little League International return address. And it was funny because I knew, like, from the history of Little League, that they didn't send rejection letters, that they in the past had only sent a letter that said congratulations. And I was just so sure in my mind that I hadn't been accepted this year that I thought, well, heck, if I had been accepted, they would have sent this like really big envelope, you know, like if you get accepted to a college and you get that big envelope that's real thick. And then I thought, no, this has to be like a rejection letter. Little League has to be sending rejection letters now, because it was just this little thin envelope. And so I got in the house and I put the mail down, and my whole family happened to be in the kitchen at the time. And I just tore open half-heartedly the envelope to read that I wasn't going to be going. And the first word said congratulations. And it took seconds to just sink in. And I let out this big yelp. And I still remember Jeff, he was standing at the sink and he dropped a dish. And I think Stephen was in the fridge, because I remember hearing the door slam in the fridge. And then I think emotions kind of took over and I started crying, and there's no crying in baseball, but yeah, I cried a little bit, I think. And I remember Jeff reaching over and just kind of tugging the letter out of my hand. And he's like, well, don't cry on your letter, you know? So that was pretty, it was pretty exciting, you know, and the boys didn't really know it, but at the time I told them, I'm like, it's a gold, they kept asking, they're like, what is it? What is it? I'm like, it's a golden ticket. And they were thinking Willy Wonka, you know, and I'm like, no, a golden ticket. And I ended up getting to explain to them what a golden ticket was. So it was really awesome.
So before Tommy asked you or the next question, I'll ask you a question, Kelly. What does your husband and what do your kids think of wife and mom, the umpire?
Oh gosh, I couldn't do this without them. They've been my number one supporters. All three of my sons either have been umpires or are currently umpires. And so now it's Aiden's turn. He just qualified, or I shouldn't say qualified, he just made the freshman baseball team. There was 37 freshmen trying out for high school baseball. And so he was really excited. He made the team and then turned around and he and his best friend took my OHSAA umpire class this year. So now they are OHSAA umpires too. My oldest son, Steven, he was one of the youngest to work college softball. He was working baseball and softball. And unfortunately, he's not umpiring right now. I'm hoping to get him back into it someday. But, you know, you can't push them too hard because if they're not liking it now, the more you push them, the more they may dislike it.
Sure.
So, and Alex even umpired for a little bit of time. But, you know, they've been my biggest supporters. And
Nice.
I think the hardest thing is you know, we're a baseball family and the boys have all played multiple sports. And especially Aiden being the baby, you know, he has tournaments and I might have a tournament that I'm working that weekend. And now he has a tournament to play in. And I get a little guilty, you know, I want to go watch my son every waking moment. That's what I enjoy is watching them play. And Aiden will be like, no, mom, no, you need to go to this tournament.
Right.
You know, and umpiring in a way is a therapy. It's a stress relief for me to kind of get away some of those stressors in life that we've got going on. And I think other umpires feel the same way because I just love it so much. And so I think there are times when stress is kind of getting to me and Aiden is like, no, mom, you really need to go umpire. It's okay. Go ahead. So,
Sure. Tommy?
All right, so Brian Henry says, how does a guy get a game with the three of you and can I have the plate?
no.
Make us a sandwich.
Brian's a good guy.
All right, well, that's it for the questions.
Love you, Brian.
He's a great guy.
Hey, Brian, listen. Hey, Brian, you can have the right field foul pole. Would that be all right?
There you go.
I'm kidding. You take the first plate, Brian.
How we
Absolutely.
doing, Tommy?
We'll set it up.
Where's it gonna be though?
We'll figure it out.
All right. Any questions, Tommy?
Oh, we're good to go.
Well, you know what, ladies, we've actually ran about 15 minutes over, but it's been a great show. And I can't thank you enough for doing this because you're laying it out there for everyone to hear. And I'm really impressed. And it's just amazing what your story is and what you've done so far and what you're going to do next. So I want to thank you from just agreeing to do it, number one, and to actually get three of my heroes together on the one show with Tommy producing it. Thank you very much. So if you want to say goodbye to anyone, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Ray. Hey, Kelly, Lisa, it's been great connecting with you and an honor. Always just love hearing about you and from you and thinking about all the great things that you're doing. Very inspiring to me. So thank you. And thanks, Ray, for setting this up for us. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ray, for having us on, and Tommy. And I think, you know, connected through Ump Life, Ray, if there's any people who, Kelly, Perry, and I are at 3 different places in North America. If there are people who want to reach out or connect with us or want to help recruit or make some connections, maybe if they only have one female umpire in their place, connect. I know that I would be more than willing, and I'm sure Kelly and Perry would too. So I'd like to put that out to everybody. And as Perry mentioned, having other allies is great. So, you know,
I'd love to have you guys all get together on all these other pages. So tell your membership to join mine. They have to join, they have to be umpires, and they have to answer 3 questions. And our page is all about being positive, and they're welcome on the page.
That's
No
great.
questions asked.
Like
We
that.
we want to make, like, it's a safe space where they are now. Our place is the same way. And I want way more women in our group because our number is like 2%. I want to get that up because it's a great place for us to get together. And then having the three of you on there now, you have so much to give, and there's no point in giving it in one place. Get it on all the pages, you know.
So thanks for having us, Ray,
Yeah.
and Kelly and Perry.
Kelly?
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you,
Um,
everybody.
You know, it's been an honor to be here with both Lisa and Perry. You're two of my heroes as well. Ray, I love that you were willing to support us like this, and I'm really honored. Thank you so much, Tommy. You too.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things I wanted to say was, you know, guys, please go home. You know, look at your daughters and your wives and your sisters and your neighbors, and you know, don't hesitate to think of them as umpires as well and baseball players, and encourage them.
Yeah.
And I know you do.
Yes.
But you know, go outside your box a little bit as well, and look outside
Yeah.
your family and think, how can I bring some of these younger people along? You know, Perry and Lisa and I we're not getting any younger, so we absolutely are moving into these roles where we love recruiting and bringing in these young people. So help us, you know, keep them in contact with us too if you run across a young girl that wants to play or to umpire or both. And I was supposed to give a couple of quick shout outs. So shout out to my elite family, my elite brothers, love y'all.
Oh, yeah.
And another shout out to Bruce Stone.
TJ Morgan?
And TJ and James and
Alta Ball?
Jim and
Don't
Ron
forget
Catman.
TJ. I'll never hear the end
Oh,
of it
yeah.
if he's
Oh,
not
I
mentioned.
I know. And yeah, but shout out to pretty much everybody out there. You know who you are. We're really honored and really happy to be here. Thanks so much.
All right, folks, that's a wrap. Join me next week when we have Steve Jasinski, AA umpire. One of the fastest kids on the rise in professional baseball. So tune into that one. I'm not going to say who I've got for Thursday, but put it this way, it could be a really cool guest. All right. So thanks a lot. Be safe, be kind, and love each other. See ya.
Thank you for joining us for tonight's broadcast of Gotta Ask, entitled Outnumbered and Breaking Barriers, with our guests, baseball umpires Perry Barber, Lisa Turbitt, and Kelly Elliott Dine. Please join us again on April 29th at 7:30 p.m., where our guest will be Stephen Jasinski. Have a good evening, and may you and your family stay safe and healthy.